I wanted to just start simply. So have you guys, between the two of you, been together for 10 years?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Have you consciously created any connection rituals between the two of you?
Not really.
No?
We don't really have that. What's happened is arisen very naturally.
Yeah.
So we don't have a set ritual. We do certain practices, but they emerge organically according to what's happening with us.
And what are some of the really valuable ones for you?
I think it's sitting across from each other with eye contact, with a direct but soft gaze, particularly in the beginning, in the first year when we had more head clunks, but there was a lot of ease in our relationship. But when we would come up to something or there'd be some reactivity to begin with, then we would just pause and sit across from each other, even if it was across the room, and do some counting our breaths quietly, like 1 to 5 is what we used, and really getting calm and just being instead of being in that state of reactivity, and that cycle never works, And so we would just breathe until we would feel a shift. Wow. And then we would be able to speak about it or say, wow, how could we have handled that more skillfully? Now we don't have that happening, but we will still sit quietly across from each other at times just to really deeply connect without words. But really, there's no rituals.
Yeah.
In that we're not relating from where we're at. We're not identified with that state so much that was difficult a few minutes ago. We're relating to it. So there's a mutual sense of intimacy with whatever's arising. So in a sense, we're both sitting side by side, gazing with mutual compassion upon what's difficult for either one of us. Mm. And that sounds complex, but it's very simple. We're both in it together all the way. So if something's difficult for me, we're both looking at it, but not in a non-compassionate way. We're looking at it in a way that invites further exploration.
And that's after we get over our reactivity. It's not that it doesn't ever show up. But fortunately, we've kind of been able to say, we're in reactivity. Let's stop and breathe, and then we'll get back to it after we've gotten into a different space.
Yeah, so that's your form of timeout, is it? It's not so much timeout.
Because we don't leave each other. We don't leave the room. We don't say, okay, I'm taking time out and I'll go for a drive. It's more, let's be together in this, stay in relationship, but pause because we don't want to loop anything that's not constructive.
So rather than leave, I would rather say, I have a desire to leave, or this aspect of me wants to leave, but I'm still going to sit here and be here in the fire of that and share that with you. So sharing that discomfort, that difficulty brings us closer.
Have you found, even in the beginning, that you had any of the pursuer-distancer dynamic happening between the two of you?
No.
None.
Zero.
That's really kind of how I knew that one of the cues that this was actually a fully aligned relationship. It was just so mutual. And we didn't even have to speak of it or be strategic, or we were completely ourselves. And I thought, oh, that's what it's supposed to feel like, ease. And there wasn't. I had always wanted it to be just met. And so it's never been that way, even from the beginning.
Lovely.
Yeah.
What about trust? Trust is just such an important aspect in a relationship.
The trust that we have is right there from the beginning. There's a sense of safety that came with it. And as we revealed more of ourselves and became more comfortable with that, even comfortable with our discomfort, the trust deepened to the point where we felt so safe with each other that the most difficult, painful, embarrassing qualities could be brought forth and served as grist for the mill, served to deepen the relationship. But without that trust, a couple cannot bring that stuff forward. Because there's a fear then, if I bring that forward, he or she may pull back, not want to be with me, etc.
Or even use it against me at some
Exactly.
level.
Yeah.
I think you were much more comfortable with revealing things about yourself right from the beginning. I found that it was so awesome to be with somebody that was that open, and I found that I needed to say things in the beginning like, I notice I'm feeling hesitant to bring something up about me that I want to share with you, and he would just receive it so well. I felt free to, and now it's just totally clear. But that took me a bit more.
So the building of the trust or the establishing of the trust comes from the feeling vulnerable enough to share with each other.
Full transparency,
That's
full
what it is,
vulnerability. Without that being full, you don't have full trust.
Yeah.
So I chose to reveal myself rather than to protect myself, but in a way that didn't disempower me. I still felt my power and my centeredness, but I also felt this rawness which I was showing her, and she was receiving it so beautifully. I was encouraged to do more and more.
Yeah, and how did you know when you first met that Diane was trustworthy, that you could share?
I knew it intuitively. I felt it. I had many relationships before. I've been a therapist for a long time, and I just knew that was there. It wasn't a naive trust. It was just every time I took it deeper, I trusted or risked more because I was a little more outspoken. She met me. For example, I was more at home with anger, both giving and receiving. Diane wasn't. But she learned so quickly that after I went, oh my God, what have I done? Now I have this woman who can see right through me, is fiery. And
It's pretty funny because I was on a spiritual path for many, many years where anger just wasn't considered spiritual. So I had to learn that it was okay. And not only was it okay, but he got mad if I didn't get mad at him. So I think I started out with saying things like, I'm starting to get irritated. You know, that was a big leap for me. And then after a while, I remember the time that when we had just done a group, I was just, in the beginning, I just assisted a little, not like now. And something he said just made me so angry. But I was very quiet in the group when it happened. I don't know what it was. It was just something I got myself worked up. So we went upstairs for lunch break, and I sat in my office and I go, okay, this time I'm gonna really express my anger. So he walked by and I said, when you said that, and I'm stomping my feet, and I said, that made me so pissed. And I just went into this whole thing, and he kind of stood there and he said, do you think you're being a little reactive? And I say, yes, and it feels really good. So I think at first, when you do learn to express it, it can be a little messy, but it's okay. Yeah.
Especially when he can receive it like that.
Totally. He just...
And then it can become even playful. If I'm in a foul
laughed.
mood and I have what we call a conscious rant, at a certain point, more often than not, I'm angry, I'm going on about something that's probably very trivial, but it's really gotten to me because I'm tired, I'm being a little narrow in myself. I will start to laugh because it's the melodramatically of it is hilarious. There I am, supposedly a mature man, doing this, and rather than beating myself up for it and going, oh, I shouldn't be doing that, I should have outgrown that, here I am, at the ripe old age of 67, still behaving like that, but seeing through it. Because when I was younger, I had this fantasy, if I meditate enough, do enough work in myself, I can be free of all the stuff in me that's unsavory or shadowy. And I found out in my 40s or so, that was never going to happen. These things were with me. So they're still with me, but they don't run the show. But they're still there, and we share that.
And if he doesn't notice, I point it out.
Extremely accurately and with very little time delay. I don't have a minute for it to take a break. But we're both very quick with our energy. We flow that way. So if she comes at me like that, I trust it, let it in. It shifts me, and vice versa. So we're not trying to be good. We're just getting more and more authentic.
It's not flat.
And it stays exciting. It keeps the passion flowing in every way because there's some risk involved, but we even learn to enjoy the risk of being together. Because this is it. This is my last relationship. I know it, and so does Diane. No plan B, no exit.
In fact, we've often spoken that obviously one of us is going to die before the others, and we've started a relationship late in life, and we just know after having this, there wouldn't be any desire to have another relationship once the other one was gone. Just,
Nothing else could come close to what you have now.
It seems like it wouldn't even be fair to another person.
Yeah, the more intimate we are with our passing, the more vivid and alive our life is together. There's nothing morbid about it. It's like, here it is. We're both mortal. I have prostate cancer. I've had it for 8 years. And I'm doing well with the protocol, but still it makes us extra vulnerable. It makes it even more important to be really, really there with each other daily.
Yes.
To not take each other for granted.
Yeah, live every day as if it's last.
Yeah, not as a cliche at any certain point. We get up and do it. I'm grateful every day that I get to do this.
So we do review, our choices that we're making. Is this the best way to use our energy that we have? And is this the best way to serve? And is this will this extend ourselves too much? And so we pull back. So we've learned to work with it.
And the deepest work I've done in my life is in this relationship. Even though it's the easiest time, it calls forth everything in me that's unhealed, in the dark a little bit, because the atmosphere is so safe. So sometimes I'm reluctant to bring it up, but there it is.
We're still working on different things from our history. You know, it'll come up and we'll, oh yeah, and it'll be so interesting when it comes up. You know, maybe in a dream or in something that's a memory or something, and then we'll work with it and we'll go, wow, the trust is so safe to do that. That even those way back things can come out and be worked with, and we'll work with each other when that happens. And it's pretty cool that we're always works in progress. We just will be. I don't think there's an end point.
And it sounds like there's a mutuality about you working with the stuff that comes up for each of you.
Yeah.
Totally.
Oh, yeah.
There's not a sense that, oh, this is my stuff, I need to work on it before I come back to you.
I don't think that's ever been that way.
No, it's worked on in the context of our we space, our shared togetherness.
And that's not fused. It's not something of where it's just, oh, this is all our stuff. It's. I mean, there's quite a bit of respect, and okay, that's your thing, and how can I support you with it? But I don't think either one of us have ever chosen to just say, okay, well, I'm just going to go deal with it, and I'll get back to you later, or I need to process this myself. But in sharing it, it's working with it, and if one person needs to just wail, then the other one is there for that.
Yeah.
I'd say our path is that of intimacy with all that we are, everything, high and low, dark and light, all of it. That's a big thing.
Yeah.
And to be intimate with something doesn't mean to fuse with it. It means to be so close to it, you pick up an enormous amount of data and feeling from it. There's a lot of resonance, but there's just enough distance from the other, be it a state or a person, to keep that one in lucid focus. And that's the essence of really deep psychotherapy. It's also the essence of how we are as a couple. There's an intimacy with everything that we are, including spiritually.
But it's not something we decided
It just
to
happened.
do. It was just natural for us. It wasn't like a methodology or something. It was just kind of who we were and how we connected.
And we both were so ready for it.
Yeah. I guess everything you've done through your life had prepared you for.
It was relationship boot camp.
Personal responsibility in your relationship. You know, it's easy for couples to kind of get into reactive states and blame the other and not take personal responsibility. So you already, that's very much established for you, and at the same time that you are sharing, you're wanting to share in the healing for each other.
Yeah, it's a given. So if something difficult happens, though, we don't always just make it about, it's all me, let's just look at me. It's let's look at you too. Let's look at the relationship too. So there's three things, me, you, and the relationship. But there's no excuse there for deflection or subtle defensiveness. It's more like, I'm going to be my own whistleblower. You are too. And in that, there's a joy. It's not like, oh my God, I got to bring this up. It's more like, wow, this is exciting. It's kind of scary sometimes, but here we are.
And I will say that if one of us is not feeling well, one of us is really stressed, or both of us, and we've been pushing, we will even say, this is a time where we could get really reactive, so we need to be really mindful. But if that hasn't happened and we have gotten reactive, we're both fiery people, and so it may be like an exchange of fire, and then a cooling down and saying, oh, I was being reactive. I mean, one of the signs of reactivity is, I'm not being reactive.
I'm not angry.
I'm being this way because, and we're so justified. And then later you go, oh, man, it still comes up at times. And then it's like really owning the responsibility for that. And then both of us looking at it and saying, wow, how could we have done it more skillfully? What was really happening? Wow, there was that 3-year-old in me just showed up and was so feeling, and I identified with her. And then then it turns into work for us, but not like labor. It's just rich. And we can use it to grow from.
Yeah, wonderful.
Yeah, I often describe intimate relationship at its best as a crucible and sanctuary at the same time. The crucible is what we're talking about in part, but there's also the sanctuary, the safety, and the immense love and the deepening. And we've realized our love doesn't have a bottom. It just goes deeper and deeper and deeper.
And the crucible is humbling. It's very humbling.
Not humiliating, but humbling.
Yeah.
Yes.
And it's such a relief. Such a relief to be in a relationship where it's so easy, and it's also such a beautiful edge. There's an edge. Otherwise, we'd be kind of doddering and kind of half asleep.
I don't think that's going to happen.
What about power between the two of you? Has there ever been any power imbalances or?
It's a shared power. We both know what it's like to have been overpowered and to overpower, especially me. But this is shared power, and it's such a delight. And implicit in that is a sense of it's never just power alone. It's always heart involved. So I can be very powerful, but my heart keeps me from getting too hard. It keeps a softening happening. Yeah. If I didn't have the power, if I was cut off from my guts, I could be very loving, but I would be incapable of taking a true stand.
Yeah.
So head, heart, guts, working in both of us.
I would say that the first year for me was more of the stretch of where, before we were married, where I had been a real harmony junkie.
Yes.
And, you know, accommodator and pleaser. And so he would bust me every time. And I'd think, oh, wow. And it was so freeing to realize where I'd been spiritually bypassing. And once I got a hold of my healthy anger and that I could express it and create the boundaries, I stepped much farther into my power. And then I feel we were much more on equal footing then, and it has been. But just in that one area of not wanting to, you know, rock the boat.
Yes.
And he would say, you know, this is, you know, don't be afraid to impose. Don't be, if you're angry, just let me have it. And I went, wow. Yeah. And then there were times he'd go, whoa, what did I do? But yeah, but as far as like just our needs, our speaking out, it really is shared. Even when we make decisions it's not ever just about one of us, because there is a we space. It's within a relationship. If I'm going to go do something, or he's going to, even if it's independent, we'll both kind of talk about it and say, what's your intuition, and do you have a full yes in your body? And we both want to have a full yes before we just go ahead and do something that's going to impact it.
So even if that's a decision for one of you personally, you know, like an individual decision, so you both in a sense make that joint decision?
If it's something that is going to have an impact on both of us, we trust each other's intuition so much. And I might be looping in my head about making a decision, and I'll say, what's your hit? You know, and he'll say to me, you know, what's your intuition, when I'm looping? So we really trust.
Or if I'm doing something that's really separate, like say a publishing decision on one of my books, or whatever, I often will almost always run it by Diane. I want to hear her intuition, even if I'm quite sure. It's not that I doubt myself. I want to hear her input, and often that deepens my response to whatever I'm facing.
And do you then make the ultimate decision about that?
Yes, but once I've heard that, so it's arisen. It's not like I'm not surprising her with hey, look at this thing I did, and she wasn't included. So we include each other, not excessively, but we do include each other.
It's not like
in
we're
what we do.
dependent on each other's input. It's more that we value it so much that if one of us said, "Well, I really want to do this," and the other one said, "Oh my gosh, I have I've got so much hesitation about it. Something doesn't feel right here." Then the other would say, "Oh, let me take a second look at that and check out what is it that you're sensing." And sometimes that will influence the decision, because we'll realize, oh, the other one picked up on something we didn't. So.
We enjoy mixing our intuition so much. When we train
That's how we
therapists
work.
and we work with groups, couples work, we're both being very intuitive, and there's a sense of people may see us interrupting each other, but we're both flowing in the same way, and it's a double input. And yet we're still separate. That's the paradox. We're very individualized, but we're also very together.
But we pick up on each other's intuitions and run with it, because it will go, oh yeah, that feels right, and then
And we didn't plan this when we met.
No.
We weren't working together. It's all unfolded very organically and naturally, and it keeps unfolding. It keeps surprising us. And now we're going, we know more surprises are coming.
We just say,
Rather-
what's next? What will
Yeah.
this next year bring? And opening to it. Yeah.
Have you ever found there's been any kind of polar opposites in your personality? Such as like one's likes to have a lot of fun and the other one's more responsible, or
Not into those bigger areas, but in smaller ones. Like, for example, I like really intense exercise and working out. I have very high metabolism. Diane doesn't have that. I have that.
He has to.
She can
He
enjoy
just
me
has to.
doing that, where I can just push and do it. 'Cause I used to be very athletic when I was younger, and I still love it, even at my age. I back down a little bit. But that's minor. The bigger topics,
see,
I don't think we have
polar.
that.
I'm trying to think. I mean, I noticed when we were first started working together, I would come from my heart, and Robert had this compassionate laser intuition, the way he would cut through. And so we had that, but they've kind of merged. I mean, they've worked so well together now that it's not as different, but I would say that your ability to cut through intellectually, to be able to see things, is rounded out with my ability to feel into it. Although we both have the other thing too. I'd say one carries more of it than the other.
Or where we're both very, very skilled. We admire them. Like Diane's ability with music and her voice still blows me away. I'm so moved by her incredible voice and presence when she sings with just that sound emerge. And she feels similarly about my writing when I just take off, and who knows where it comes from. It gets very poetic, very insightful. There's a certain magic to it. We're not envious at all of the other. We celebrate that difference.
But I guess what you're asking, is more about how we are as beings. If there is a polarity between us, because I think, and this is what I see in people that we work with, couples, is that when each person is doing their healing work and stepping into their voice and their power and their compassion and their embodiment, there's a natural polarity that arises. It's not something that's created through specific techniques and rituals and things. It just arises.
So we never did anything in the early years and after to emphasize her femininity, my masculinity. That polarity is very strong in us, but it emerged organically from our connection. The closer we were to each other on every level, that connection became the aphrodisiac, made me even more masculine in the deepest sense, her more female. So our meetings in so many ways were very charged and beautiful and deep because of that, but not because of a forced polarity. It just was there.
Yeah.
can you explain a little bit more about that? So the deep connection allowed for your masculine and feminine to arise more naturally.
Everything emerged out of that. So in other words, the deep connection made it possible to go very deep in every other area. Rather than being in a certain area like sexually and trying to, okay, now we can get intimate through doing this, it was more like, we already have this. And the deeper we are in our closeness, then the more that realm, things would flow and deepen.
I think that the connection came from the transparency that we both had and the trust that built that very quickly, realizing, oh, the way this person received this, it's safer to go deeper and to expose more. Mm-hmm. And it's not only received, but there's a welcome with that. Mm-hmm. And so that more and more created that connection. And I think there was just a natural ease anyway.
Plus a mutual recognition.
Yes.
Recognition. There was no sense of, I'm settling here. Diane's settling. No, we're being stretched in the most beautiful way.
So, Esther Perel talks about, maintaining desire as coming from sort of seeing our separateness, being able to look across at our partner as a separate, mysterious person. Mm-hmm. Is it like that? Is it like that for you?
That's included too. Yeah. I mean, I look deeply at Diane. I don't have all the answers. Actually, I go more into the place where there are no answers. There's just mystery. Manifesting as this magnificent being I'm sharing my life with, but we're both quite intimate with the mystery, with a capital M of existence. And in that realm, we don't know anything, but we know that we don't know, and then we become intimate with that sense of not knowing, and we share that. So we can share profound silence.
Well, sometimes we'll look at each other and I'll just say, who are you? Who is this being? Or he'll say the same thing to me. It's like, and I remember sometimes you'll say, wow, we're really different people, but not in a celebratory way, not like, oh, we're merged and oh no, it's more like, wow, there is such immense depth here, and we'll never ever really know everything, or certainly not be the same person, and yet somehow it meshes and works, but we're very different in many ways.
Sometimes I say to people, don't settle for oneness, go for intimacy. Because intimacy includes oneness and the dance of separateness. So you get to dance with the infinite, the one, and you're also dancing with the particularities, the differences. And it's all happening at the same time. And intimate relationship provides an environment where you can do that. Especially in these days where there's so much more equality between male and female. Yeah. There's a possibility to use relationship as a profound spiritual practice, an awakening practice.
Because you have to be very present, and you have to know what's going on other than the momentary thought or reaction. What else is happening inside me, and who else is speaking inside me, and what part of my past is coming out. And that really is a practice. It is a path.
And you have to take very good care of the individuality, the autonomy, and also of what transcends that without getting lost in the transcendence. So relationship's a perfect place to practice all this. That's why we're so passionate about it.
Obviously, emotional self-awareness is very, very important piece, and emotionally attuning to each other. How often, in a day, do you share emotionally with each other?
Gosh, it's so natural. I just don't even think we could kind of pluck it out.
I think it's pretty often. If one of us is feeling something that's a little off in some way, or difficult or beautiful, well, more often than not, we'll say that. We'll share it. So it's a given part of our intimacy. It's the emotional intimacy, sharing all that. Because that says so much. If I just tell you what I'm feeling and I'm honest with you, you know so much about me in those moments. Yeah. I'm angry. I feel sad. I miss you. Stuff like that. It opens the doors. And what's beautiful is you don't have to be in agreement intellectually for that. You could be having an argument, disagreement, and still resonate emotionally. If you're angry at me, I could resonate with that, even though I don't agree with what you're angry about. Then when we return to the disagreement level, which is mostly intellectual, it's not a big deal because there's a connection. And many couples try and work it out above the emotional level. They don't deal with the emotions, and they don't really get through it. It's a standoffer. It's like this. So we're very passionate about being emotionally very, very connected to the other.
And I think
sharing that
openly.
When it happens, of course, we have the advantage of working together in our home at most of the time. And so, I'm often doing other things maybe 10-15% of the time, but we are here a lot. And we honor very much if the other one says, oh, I've got something going on right now, something's happening, or I feel disconnect, or I'm really upset about what just happened in this email, or whatever it is, and then we'll stop. It doesn't, whatever we're doing, we'll stop and say, okay, let's, and it might take 5 minutes, might take a minute. It's usually not something but if it's big, then we'll be there.
But there's no plan to do that.
It's natural. It's a natural part.
Yeah.
But it certainly sounds like it's takes high priority in your relationship.
Yeah. And we've learned to do it very efficiently. One can take an hour to explain what you're feeling, or you could do it in 10 seconds, say, I'm angry. Stop, period. The other person breathes it in, and we go on.
And we know each other's history so well that if one of us is really struggling with something, maybe feeling fear about something, we'll say, well, this feels like when you were smaller and you had this going, and you go, yeah, that's what's up right now. And it's pretty brief at that point, Or if it's big, then we'll set aside time to really work with it. Yeah, but it's just, it's part of it's part of what we do and who we are, and so it's not like, oh, we need to practice being empathetic with each other. It's more, it would be so weird not to.
Yeah, it's just of such fundamental importance.
Fundamental.
Yeah, foundational.
And emotional attunement, I presume that's very much there.
Yeah, it's very central.
So you would pick up from each other even if you weren't mentioning it, you'd pick up from each other.
Oh, we can usually tell if something's
going on. It can be very subtle.
Oh, yeah.
You still pick it up.
Yeah. I'll even, in the earlier years, I would check in. I could feel just something, and I would say, okay, is there anything happening between us, or is it and it would be that he would be in his writing. He would be so, but I would just check, and then didn't have to think about it, didn't worry. Now I can just, we pretty much sense it. But I think if one of us were off, because of course we get off, you know, and the other one might say, you know, I really think that this is what this is. And even if there's a blustering or a defense, it's that we trust that the other one actually can see. And so we'll pause. It's not that there's never reactivity, but we'll pause and go, you know, let me sit with that, because that feels.
And I want to say something about emotional attunement, because emotion is more than feeling. Emotion includes feeling, conditioning, cognition, social factors. It's a very complex thing. In fact, to study emotion in real depth is to study everything. So if I'm emotionally attuning to her, I'm also attuning to her mentally, at a feeling level. I'm aware of her conditioning. So it opens up everything. So I'm looking at more than just a so-called feeling. Yeah.
But I know that there was a time, probably a few times, where Robert was in a particular state, and I was busy with something else, and I wasn't really connecting with it. And he looked at me and said, "You're not feeling me. You know, you're not really getting where I am." And I go, "Oh, yeah." And I'm sure we've done it vice versa, but that would be like, "Oh, okay. So let me," because our lives just go and go and go, and we have to know that when there's that flag, that we stop.
And when there's disconnection, we address it very, very quickly.
So the sense for you is that we need to be emotionally connected all the time?
Well, that's probably impossible.
Not as a pressure, but that's kind of like a given. And when we're not, it shows up very quickly as if some sort of disconnection, not feeling that close. Then we have to say things like, "My heart's a little closed now. I don't feel that close to you," or to share that, and that reconnects us.
And we're always curious, like, well, what is happening? What's going on? So let's jump in and figure it out, or feel it out. Yeah.
And this may sound like work to some, but actually it's very easy. There's a lot of ease in our relationship. But there's a willingness almost at all times to deepen it, to say something that maybe is difficult to say. It's always there, but there's no tension with it. I'm not waiting, "Oh my God, what's she going to say to me?"
Yes.
It's more, here we are, and it's so good to be with you and to know that I cannot get away with anything with you, and I don't want to get away anymore from that.
Yeah, so your relationship is well past the stage that a lot of couples feel is, you know, okay, so I need to bring up an issue and I'm scared to know how to do it so that my partner doesn't get defensive.
Mm-hmm.
No, I don't think that's there anymore. Certainly, I can't. I mean, if it were something that was quite tender, we'd probably consider the best way to bring it. But really, there's nothing strategic. You know, it's more that, and I'm sure I was more that way in the beginning. You know, of just challenge was not, and I was, you know, I had been in a relationship where criticism was not accepted. So it was, or even a input was taken as criticism. So I had been very careful, and it was just so different with this that it's just, it really doesn't come up now.
No eggshells.
No, yeah.
No eggshells.
Yeah.
Robert, do you feel that it's been more difficult for you as a man to develop emotional attunement?
I think it's more difficult for men in general, mostly because of conditioning. But when we see men in our group settings, the men are as emotionally raw as the women. Mm-hmm. So when I cracked open in my 20s, entering deep therapy, I was very interested in how I ticked emotionally, so I studied it a lot. So I have a very keen sense of myself emotionally and of others. Mm-hmm. But I chose to learn that. There was no emotional literacy 101 when I grew up. No. Zero. And there still isn't very much of that. It's so sad because it's so important. Without that, how can we be truly intimate with another? Mm-hmm. We just can't.
Empathy. I always feel that empathy plays such a central role. So it's the emotional attunement and the empathy.
Healthy empathy. Healthy empathy means empathy that comes with an empathic boundary. So if I'm just only empathetic with you and you're suffering, I could get lost in your suffering, then I'm of no use to you because I'm overly absorbed, I'm identified with it. Yeah. If I have the empathic wall, I can get close enough to your suffering to really be with you. You can tell I'm there, but I'm also just removed enough to take skillful action.
You're resonating, but not
Yes.
identifying with.
Yes.
Yeah.
So the empathic wall is crucial, because we see many people, especially a lot of women, who are very empathetic, but they don't have their boundaries in place.
And when we work with therapists in training, that's something that's, a foundational thing to be established, is that empathic wall.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But not too thick.
No. Porous.
Permeable. Yeah.
Yes.
So, are there ever, in your relationship, then, is there ever any issues to bring up? Or is it that you share on an ongoing basis so that, issues actually don't arise?
No, we sort of talk them without calling them issues. When small difficulties, ways where we don't quite meet, we could call those issues, but they don't feel like issues. They feel like opportunities to go a little deeper.
We don't make a problem out of having a problem, so it doesn't seem like it's, in the beginning I was like, oh, I gotta make everything okay. And then I realized, it's actually, it's what is here right now is not reflective of the entire thing. Like if we had bumps, that didn't mean, oh my gosh, the relationship is the wrong one, or we're not gonna. It's more that now it's part of the flow. It's not linear, just smooth la la to paradise. It's real life, and there's been health issues, there have been financial issues, there have been children issues, there have been all kinds of things that come work, but it's just part of the tapestry. It's not.
And they're things that you share together in resolving them.
Oh yeah.
Mm-hmm. What it takes from us to resolve each of those so-called issues is precisely what deepens us. Mm-hmm. I have to get more vulnerable, cannot resort to defensiveness or deflection, and that's such a beautiful thing to know and to practice.
And I think that empathy always keeps deepening, where you can feel it a little bit more, and less reactivity, feeling a little bit more of where the other person is. It doesn't mean that it just goes away. We're people and we're different beings, so we're going to have a head clunk sometimes. We're both outspoken, but there's an acceptance of the expression, and it doesn't. The thing is, I guess we do have some ground rules, which we do teach to couples, and that's no name calling, and no shaming, and no sarcasm.
No disrespect.
So no disrespect. That's just like a given. And if there's even the slightest bit of a, well, you should, where there's that slightest bit of shaming, we'll name it. The other one will say that's shaming. And we'll go, well, you're right, sorry, and back off. It doesn't happen very often anymore, but those are definitely ground rules. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and obviously, no affairs or something. I mean, there's some really basic things that are givens. Yeah. But speaking that way is, it's so easy for couples to slip into just cursing at each other, or, really doing a blame rather than I'm so angry and really owning their own emotions. So, but that seems that, we don't even think about that now, but it's, yes, that's there.
For you, what's the most important thing to remember when you're communicating? I guess you've just been telling me all about those things, aren't you? I guess.
Let's see.
Love.
The caring for each other.
Love, compassion, caring. All, there's an overlap between all three of those, but there's a sense of not losing touch with that. So if I'm communicating with Diane and I've lost touch with that, what I'm saying is not of much use. The next step is to say that this is shut, I'm not open. And whatever I'm saying is of less importance to consider literally. Mm-hmm. So there's that shift. And in that sense, the connection remains central, priority. If I've lost touch with that, my energy, my focus is to return to that rather than to continue on my track.
Yeah.
Mm. It's very easy to get caught up in your track. You want to make your point and the other person just doesn't get you, and all of that. When that's happening, you're out of touch. And we know when we're out of touch. And we do get out of touch sometimes.
And it doesn't feel good.
And it doesn't feel good, and there's the immediate sense of wanting to do something about it, which does not include making the other person wrong. It's not her fault. It's not my fault. But we're out of touch. Let's sit down. Let's tune in here and see what we can do.
Yeah.
There's that, and we don't wait days or even hours or even minutes sometimes. We want to face it as soon as possible.
It's much more efficient.
Yeah, that's pretty important, isn't it? That you're both valuing that being in touch almost all the time.
As opposed to, well, I need space, that type of thing.
Which-
Excuse me.
Yeah, I mean, we have healthy space from each other for sure, but it's different. And I would say that when we're working with couples too, it's the same for us. What we teach couples is that the priority in the relationship is the connection. And so if you can get too independent from each other with just a thread of connection, and there's not enough we space, you can also get too merged, obviously the codependent place, which you don't want to have. But to be aware of, how is this serving our connection? Are we disconnected? Let's do something about it. It's not something we think about so much now, but for many people need to learn, we're not doing well because we just haven't created that we space enough. There's not enough safety in that container, and we're wondering why we're not doing so well.
So the idea of a really conscious, deeply loving relationship sounds great on paper, but most couples don't want to do the work that's required to make that happen, or else they pick partners who it's not possible to do that with, and they try and make that work.
Yeah. And just talk to me, can you, Robert, a little bit more about the taking space piece, because a lot of people feel like they need to take some space to get themselves,
I think a more skillful approach is to confess that desire to take space and say what that really means. I want to get away from you. I don't like you right now. And to stay put and share that. Unless you're in an abusive situation, then it's appropriate to leave. But if you're not, it takes more guts, more courage to stay there and to say, here's what's going on for me right now. And maybe, more often than not, the other person will then start to open because they're hearing the truth.
Well, you can imagine if a husband and wife are having a real confrontation and the man says, I'm going out for a drive, I'm taking space from you, and it won't be. And that, in some places, sometimes that can be skillful when it's just so charged and so destructive that you just have to you really need to take it. More people indulge in walking out, I think, than in staying in a relationship. But that woman may have had a history of being abandoned or being felt worthless, and it's gonna make the distance between them worse. It's part of it is I'm so upset right now. I really want to leave, and I'm not feeling close to you. My heart is closed, but I'm gonna stay right here. I'm just gonna breathe, and that takes a lot.
And if there's a lot of charge, sometimes what they can do is what we've described to be a man in the previous book, Emotional Intimacy. I described just a conscious rant.
Yeah, but that's not at your partner.
No, but it can be done. In 2 minutes, one could go off to a separate part of the home and just cut loose with all that extra energy, say whatever needs to be said, exaggerate, be dramatic, then return to the scene they just left in a much different state. That's quite possible.
So and have you guys done that? Conscious rant?
I love conscious rants. And not just for anger, for all kinds of things. Despair or sadness, grief. But there have been a couple times where we've just had some, and it was resolved enough, but I still was charged afterwards, and so I went down on the elliptical and I said, bah, 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 and I was just yelling, and he was upstairs. He said, "Yeah, that was great. That was great. You moved that energy, and it was gone. It was just I still needed to move it, and it's not appropriate to just blast the other one with it. But if the energy's still there, especially doing something physical and making sound is a really good way.
Yeah.
Otherwise, one can end up in an unskillful anger release, a venting, or can repress it, which is just as harmful.
Yes.
So in between the repression and the overexpression, here's the capacity to sanely share that state.
Yes.
I will say, though, that having conscious rants is such a wonderful tool for a couple where, say, the guy comes home from work and he's so upset what's happening. Generally, he won't get enough rest and things will be going with the family and somebody will get blasted with it. And generally it's his wife.
Yeah.
And this is, obviously a generalization. But if he said to his wife, I am so loaded, and she said, wow, it feels like you could use a conscious rant, I'll be your witness. And then she just sat there and then let him say everything as spiritually incorrect as he wants to, if fully physically, about the work to the boss, whatever it is. It's like steam valve on a pressure cooker. It's done. The weight is gone. They're there, and they're able to meet in a way that's much, much more less charged.
Yes.
See, more than that is needed for full intimacy, but that can be a very helpful part of getting more intimate, becoming a safer place for your partner.
Yeah, so in the conscious rant, if it's about another situation besides the partner or the relationship, it's you feel that that's fine for the partner to be there as a witness.
Yes.
Yeah.
But if it's to do with the partner or the relationship,
Yeah, that's too charged to do that.
To do that
by yourself.
away on your own,
Yes.
and then come back.
And if you're in a house where you just really you don't have a lot of privacy, you can also take a dense pillow and hold it in your mouth and just let sound come out. Like a mother might need just feeling like with her kids, she's just going to do something. She's going to snap, and she'll go into the garage or down in the basement and take it and just open the mouth and let sound come out for a minute. It doesn't take long, and come back, and it's really helpful.
You can tell we're not fans of repression.
But also
but
not fans of blasting someone else
But
irresponsibly.
healthy expression is such a beautiful. It keeps things alive and vital.
Yeah.
It's not just about anger; it's about all the emotions.
Yes. So, have you found over the years that your conscious rants have increased, decreased?
Over the years, we became more aware of how important they were.
I'd say they come. It depends on what's going on in my life.
Okay. Yeah.
If there's a lot of difficult things are going on, I'll have a lot of them. If there's not, I won't. So it's not to do with a span of time.
No.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So they're still important.
Yes.
An important release for you.
Because life happens and things, I mean,
Yeah.
I had a son who went into the army, and that was so hard for me, so hard. I marched in the peace marches in the 70s, and so I had some real rants, and then of course he was hurt, and not supported by the government, and I would just have them at the government and at the army. And I'd be angry, and then I'd end up just grieving, really wailing, and then it would go back to the anger. But if I had carried that constantly, it would have been just too much, too painful. It was very healing to be able to move it that way. And it's in a neutral space where you're offering up, and knowing that he was here he didn't say anything. When the witness just is there saying yes, or say it even more dramatically, or just really, really let it go. It's just, it creates an intimacy there too, a connection there, because you're not dealing with it by yourself. You're dealing with it yourself, but you're sharing it, and
It's also wonderfully humbling to do a conscious rant fully, because we don't look like our usual quote unquote mature self. We can look very silly. We're stomping, we're pounding.
And you have to get past the
It's
self-consciousness.
like an adult
too.
temper tantrum, but it is conscious, and it's wonderful for the ego, because there we are, and we're exposed, and then it starts to feel really good. It's like you're getting to dance like no one's watching. You're just free.
But so many people have those rants and they're not conscious. And it'll be blasted at their partner, or they'll be ranting all around the house, and everybody else would be kind of like, don't get close to dad right now, or mom, because she's really on a, And this is conscious. It's saying, I'm going to have a beginning and an end, and this is specifically what it's for.
And
that's
it's
totally
part of what we
different.
talked about earlier. It's part of a trust. A couple does not have deep enough trust is not going to be doing conscious rants, and not doing them very skillfully. So it's part of trust to be able to be there for your partner, to trust that your partner will be there for you when that happens. So we're going back full circle. Without the trust, it's very difficult to do what we're talking about. So that means you have to develop more intimacy with the place in you, and the other does too, that's not trusting. Be able to share one's mistrust is an act of trust. Because we all have those zones of mistrust from our early years when things went badly. It's so important to expose that. And when they're exposed, and the other person's really there, there's a chance for a healing and a deepening of trust and real safety.
Have you guys ever had a really big difficulty in your relationship?
Such as just wondering if we're going to make it kind of thing?
Yeah, something that was a huge, not so much an issue from the outside that you were dealing with, but something between the two of you.
Gosh, can you?
I don't think so. We've had some outside things we had to consider early on about our past history and so on, and getting to know the other person's story and breathing that in and out. But as far as between us, no, nothing that's even remotely close to considering should we be together or not. It was more, God, this is so difficult, and here we are, and then we get through it. So next time something difficult would arise, we'd remember that we got through the other one by being transparent, by being honest, by being present, by not trying to fix it too quickly.
Yeah, because that would be my default, was to jump in and just try to smooth it over. And he said, this is not, it's too soon. We need to work with this. But I can't think of anything that was, there were, some hurt feelings and things about stuff where we're, and knowing how to just merge our homes together and our ways of life. But it wasn't, there just wasn't anything where it was.
Nothing that felt like a major difficulty.
No.
Not like, oh, this is, we may not make this. Nothing like that. When I'd be reactive inside myself the first, 6 months, like, I'm so going back to California. And that would last about 5 minutes,
minutes.
But I indulged in that for a minute and then thought, and then, of course, and then, oh yeah, it's time to work this out,
You were talking before, and I think you've answered this question, but, each of you are obviously comfortable about taking a stand with anything that you need.
Mm. Yeah. Very comfortable.
So how significant is this connection for you compared with your other relationships?
Light years different.
Profoundly. Far, far more significant. The other ones were like learnings, getting it, not getting it, errors, deepenings. I mean, they all were important. They were preparing the way. But this was not just a little bit better. This was radically different.
It was way better
and it's
than
continued.
I hoped.
It just gets deeper and deeper.
And when did you know that this relationship was going to be different?
Early. Very early.
But we didn't speak of it.
We didn't speak it though, but I knew.
It was so precious. We kind of went, oh, this is worth really spending time with, and I don't want to project anything in the future. I don't want to put pressure on us by us speaking too prematurely about the future.
We only spoke of the future when it felt wrong not to speak of it. And we had to say something. It's a bit like when we first were connecting through the phone. I was in Vancouver, she was in Ojai, California. We were talking, it was deeper and deeper, but we weren't talking about us.
No, we weren't flirting, it wasn't anything like
deeper.
that.
And at a certain point, I remember waking up one night and I thought, I want to meet this woman. So I sent her an email saying, I had this niggling feeling it's time for us to meet. And she went, oh.
And I read that and I went, oh God. Because we had met, I had seen his poem online and I had contacted him so I could put it to music. And I was just, every time we'd talk for a couple hours over the 3 weeks that I was writing the music, and we'd start with that and then we went on to every topic. And it was so easy. And I thought, oh, this is so nice. I've got this co-creative friend, 1,300 miles away. And it's uncomplicated. It's just, and then when he said, I want to come meet you, I went, oh God, like that. Oh. And we both kind of had an intuitive feeling about it, but it wasn't love at first sight. It wasn't like, oh, look at, there's all this, stuff. It was really kind of, the veils kind of dropped over the 2 days that he was there. And it wasn't until we actually hugged goodnight that I realized, oh my God, this is like the other half of my hug. And we couldn't let go.
Love at first touch, I like to call it.
Yeah.
And we've been together ever since then.
Yeah.
There's the recognition, the veils parted, and it was like, okay, this is it.
How does your relationship feel now compared to in the early days?
Deeper, richer. But it's not like a break with it. It was great in the beginning. It got better. People told me after I wrote my book on transformation through intimacy, you've only been with this woman 2 years. How can you say this? You just wait. Okay, I waited, and it's gotten better and better.
Well, and you had been
deeper.
counseling couples for decades, so it was based on that. And then with the what came from our relationship, but it wasn't based on our short relationship. However, it's just gotten more and more and more ease. And
everything we navigate just takes, like right now we navigate being older, aging, things breaking down with the body. And that brings us closer. And
sometimes we would look at each other and go, wow, we got through that whole time, or we just, it'd be like a whole period of time, or something that we were working out that was maybe the next level of our own personal work. Whatever it was, we'd look and go, wow, we didn't think it could get deeper, but it did. Like we went into this next plunge, and here we are.
so I started to look at it years ago as not having some final depth of love. And just like I don't look at spirituality as having a final realization, I see it just goes deeper and deeper and deeper into the mystery. And there's a joy in that. There's no final rung of immunity. We just go further and further.
So age has there's no barrier to age, and the common pattern of the longer a couple is together, the more distance is quite the opposite.
We're the
So
opposite.
quite the opposite, yeah.
We're the opposite.
And we're going through the aging, because we're just 3 years apart, and so we're going through the aging process together. And there have been times where we've actually, mourned some of the things that have fallen away with our bodies that we can't do, and yet at the same time, which is lovely to be able to express that instead of trying so hard to patch it together and also, though, there's an embracing of becoming elders, which is kind of a trip. About elders, but realizing, wow, we're in that phase of our life now, and let's embrace that and our mortality. We know that time is precious because we don't know how much time we have. We don't. No one ever does, but you become much more aware of it, and so it makes our choices of what we do with our lives now much more focused in that context.
And sexually, Robert, you've talked about how our sex life really reflects our relationship.
Yes.
So can you say something about your sex life?
I'd say our sex life is our energetic flow that way has gotten richer and deeper, and it's also been altered by the aging process. There's things we could do when we were younger that would probably land us in the hospital now.
It ends up with 5 trips to the chiropractor.
So there's a sensitivity to that, to the aging, and there's also not a clinging to it has to be like it once was, because it evolves, it shifts. Everything is deepening in a way, but it's not following the same pattern we may have thought it would have a long time ago.
And of course, when you're younger and you're first together, it's more often, and the whole celebration of it. But there's a more of a that richness that's the same in our relationship, and that exchange and the sweetness and the appreciation.
And a
It's so
complete
lovely.
expression of the connection that's already there in the rest of our lives. So I would say, in a certain sense, the whole relationship is foreplay. I don't mean in a sexual context, but
No.
all the conversations, all the little touches, all the interplay, that's deepens our intimacy. So if we move into the sexual realm, there's not like a big stretch. It's there.
But again, there's still no rituals. There's still nothing to amplify it or try to make the charge bigger or anything. It's just a part of the flow.
We never did anything like tantric practices. Things would happen that were remarkable sexually, but they came naturally because of our connection and the trust and the remarkable opening that could happen.
So just one last question. For those couples who have got to a stage in the relationship, they've been in the relationship for some time, and they've got to the stage where it's sort of feeling stale. There's not a lot of vibrancy and aliveness, and it just kind of feels stale. What would you suggest to them to help them grow into the kind of relationship that you've got?
The simple answer is risk more. And then if I unpack that, then in that is more emotional disclosure, more vulnerability, more identifying of where I or the other, we take each other for granted, clarifying that, looking at what elements of one's shadow have not been brought forth. In other words, doing some more excavating, not just expecting the fact you're together to be enough. You've got to do more. There's work to be done.
And I would tag on to that. There's always more to do in your own inner work and healing. And there are things that you can put off and ignore for decades. And so I would say if each person did some deep therapeutic work, and then as a couple together, where they can see where some of the things, we've worked with people that have been together 25, 30 years, and maybe thought they weren't going to continue, or they just didn't know. And to be able to get to the place that still hadn't been touched, that hadn't been healed, and to bring that out, and the vulnerability between the two, it can create a whole fresh start.
And I would add, instead of trying to get turned on because things have gotten stale, doing some sort of sex therapist recommended practice, whatever, instead of doing that, explore your turned offness. Look at its historical origins. Really make that a study. Where am I turned off? And I want to know where that came from, how it manifests in my life. Where am I shut down? Because we can mask that by trying to get turned on, or by doing certain practices that make us feel more juicy, but we're covering so much. When you uncover all that stuff, relationships aren't boring, they're exciting. Scary, but exciting too. Yeah.
Good news and the bad news.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, guys. I've so appreciated you sharing.
Thank you.
Thank you, Julie. We've really enjoyed being with you.